Hey guys, and welcome to another OnShape tutorial. So this one's going to follow on from our completed hinge tutorial. So we made all the parts of our hinge, we assembled it, and then we did an orthogonal drawing of it. In this project, we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to make a project with more moving parts. And what we're going to be making is called a trammel. So a trammel is a mechanism that is used to draw or cut ellipses. And if I animate it, show you how it works, they're quite interesting visually to watch. So there you go, you can see how it works. So this is a 3-axis trammel. There's 3 axes which the grey followers you can see right along, and with this you can create either cutting or drawing ellipses of different shapes based on the size of the sliders that you have in it. So to start this one off, you're going to want to go to your OnShape homepage and create a new document, and you can just call it trammel. So to create the trammel, there's only really 3 parts we need to create, and then we'll assemble them in an assembly. So the first part we need to create is the base with all of the channels in it for the sliders to follow. Then we'll create the sliders which fit into the channels, and then we'll create the handle which holds them all together. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the top plane, press N on our keyboard to normalize, and we're going to start a new sketch. Now we're creating a 3-axis trammel, which means that our base is going to be hexagonal. So we're going to choose the polygon tool here from our ribbon, click on the origin point and drag out your cursor horizontally, and then click again. I said we're going to create a hexagon, so we need to have 6 sides. So move your cursor until you get to 6 and then click again. Then we're going to want to dimension our shape. So click the dimension tool, and from the center origin point to the edge of the circle, we want that to be 75 millimeters. Okay, then we can rename this sketch, and I'm just going to call it the base. Click the tick, and then we're letting OnShape know that we've finished that sketch. Next thing I'm going to do is rotate into 3D space, and then click the extrude tool, then select the hexagon that we just drew, and we're going to extrude it 10 millimeters. So type 10, and then we'll rename this again to base. Now it's really important with this project that all of your measurements and angles, etc., are accurate. Otherwise, when it comes to assembly and animating your trammel, it may not fit together correctly, or it may not function as intended. So pay particular attention to all of the dimensions and angles and so on from this point forward. Okay, the next thing we want to do is we're going to create a drawing on the top face of this hexagonal prism that we've just created. So I'm going to click on the top face, press N on the keyboard to normalize, and then start a new sketch. Now, to create the channels for our sliders to run through, we're going to select the line tool, and we're going to use the line tool to divide our hexagon through the center point from corner to corner 3 times, like shown. Okay, so we've basically divided our hexagon by splitting it in half 3 times with the line tool. The next thing we want to do is use the offset tool to offset each of these lines. So we're going to select the offset tool, click a line, press enter, offset it 5 millimeters in that direction. Click the same line, change the arrow, press enter, and then enter again. Click your next line, press enter, then enter again. Click your next line, use the arrow to change direction, then enter, enter. Click the line, enter, enter, and then click it again. Use the arrow to change direction, and then click enter, enter. Now that you've completed that, your hexagon should look like this, where we basically have 3 groups of 3 lines that perfectly dissect our hexagon in half, and they should all meet together in the middle like so. If it doesn't look like that, you might just have to go and check that you offset the correct lines each time. Alright, the last thing we're going to do is you're going to select this project geometry tool, and if you click in the middle of the hexagon, it will project the border, the perimeter of it. And then we're going to rename this one channels and click the tick. Okay, once you've created that sketch and finished it, we're going to select the extrude tool, and you're going to select the 6 large triangles that we created around the edge of our hexagon, and we're going to extrude those 15 millimeters. So it's 15, and we're going to check that it's coming up and away from our base, and then we can rename this channels. You'll want to make sure that add is selected because we're adding these to the base plate. Okay, and once we've done that, you can select the tick to let OnShape know that we're finished. And then you should have a 3-dimensional object that looks like this. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is create the sketch for our sliders. So what we're going to need to do is click on the face at the bottom of the channels that we've just created. Press N on the keyboard to normalize, and then select sketch. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is draw a rectangle. So I'm going to select the rectangle tool from my ribbon at the top left here, and I'm going to draw a rectangle in this channel. I'm going to start by clicking on the left side of the channel a little way along it, and then I'm going to drag my rectangle out to the other side of the channel and click again. When it asks me to select the dimension for the width, I'm going to just press escape, and I'm going to leave that for the moment because I'll dimension this rectangle in a moment. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line from the origin point up the center of this channel, extending past the top of the rectangle that we just drew. The next thing I'm going to do is select the line tool again. I'm going to draw a line from this top left point of the rectangle to the line we just drew at an angle. It doesn't matter which angle because we're going to define that in a second. Click again and then press escape because we don't want to dimension that line. Then I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom. So I'm from the bottom left corner of our rectangle. So I'm going to click from the bottom left corner of the rectangle to the line that we just drew, and then press escape. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is use the dimension tool by clicking the dimension tool in your ribbon or pressing D on your keyboard. Select the angled line and then the horizontal line and drag that out. And we want that angle to be 30 degrees. Then we're going to do the same at the bottom, so select the angled line and then the horizontal line and drag your angle out and then change it to 30 degrees. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to mirror these 2 lines to the other side. So in your ribbon at the top, select mirror, then select the vertical line that we drew, and now select the 2 angled lines, and when you're done, press escape to let OnShape know that you're finished. Okay, we've got a couple more things to do before we finish this sketch. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to dimension our original rectangle that we drew. So I'm going to select the dimension tool, click either the left or right edge of the rectangle and drag that out. And we want our slider to be 50 millimeters long. Okay, the last thing we need to do is we just need to make our sketch so that it's more well defined. So at the moment, there's a lot of blue lines, and that's not a good thing because OnShape doesn't have all of the information it needs to make a well-defined sketch. So we're going to use the dimension tool and click that dot at the bottom of our shape and the origin. We'll just type 10 in there. The other thing we'll need to dimension is the angle of this line, and that will constrain the sketch. Once you've done that, you can click the tick. Actually, we'll rename the sketch, sorry, call it slider. Click the tick to let OnShape know that we're finished. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is click extrude, and we're going to select the sketch that we just made. So you can just click that in the model tree. We're going to extrude it 15 millimeters, and we want to create a new part. So make sure the new is ticked, and you've typed 15 millimeters into the dialog box. We'll rename it slider, and then click the tick. Okay, the last thing we want to do is we want to rename these parts now so we know which one refers to which. So if I mouse over this part, you can see it highlights the base. So I'm going to right click on it and rename it base. And the other part, I'm going to right click, press enter, right click, and I'm going to rename it slider. Cool. Alright, now a slider needs to have a hole in the center of it so that we can attach it to our handle. So what we're going to do is select the top face of our slider, press N on the keyboard, and then start a new sketch. We're going to select the line tool, and we're going to draw a line from the top point of our slider down to the bottom point. And then press escape. We don't need to dimension that. Then we're going to get the circle tool and move our cursor along this line until we get to the center point. Remember, the center point will be highlighted by a little yellow square. I'm going to click and drag out my circle, then click again. And we're going to dimension the circle to be 6 millimeters in diameter. Then you can select tick to let OnShape know that we're finished. Actually, I'll double click on that sketch and I'm going to rename it slider hole, and then click the tick. I'm going to rotate into 3D space, select extrude, and then I've got to select both halves of that circle that I just drew. We're wanting to remove material downwards, and in the merge scope, make sure that only slider is selected. We don't want to cut a hole in our base. If base is selected, you'll need to click the little cross next to it to delete it, and then select the slider. Once you've done that, change the depth to 15 millimeters and click the tick. Alright, so we've created 2 out of 3 parts. The last thing we need to do is just create the handle. Now the handle probably has the most complex geometry out of all 3 parts, so it's the one we'll need to pay the most attention to make sure that you get the geometry and spacing of things correct. Okay, for the last part, we're just going to select any of the top faces of our baseboard here. So I'm going to select this triangle, press N to normalize, and then start a sketch. We're going to start by drawing a triangle. So click the inscribed polygon tool here, and just going to click from the origin point and drag out horizontally your shape, and then click again, then move your cursor to the left to reduce the number of sides to 3. The next thing we're going to do is click D for dimension. Click on one of the edges of your triangle and drag the measurement out. We're then going to change that to 50 millimeters and click enter. The next thing we're going to do is draw circles at each of these 3 points on the triangle. So if you select your circle tool, click and drag that out. Our first circle is going to be 6 millimeters in diameter. Then we're going to draw another one that is 12 millimeters in diameter. And you can do that on each of the 3 points of the circle. First creating the small then the large, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter as long as on each point there is one 6mm diameter circle and one 12mm diameter circle. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, like we did with the hexagon, is we're going to split the triangle evenly into 3 sections. So select the line tool, click a point on the triangle, and then draw a line that goes through the origin point to the other side of the triangle. And do that for each of the points on the triangle. So from the point of the triangle through the origin to the other side, and then one more from this point all the way to the other side. Okay, we need to do the same thing to this triangle that we did to the hexagon at the start, where we offset each of those lines that we just created. So now if you go and select the offset tool, select a line, press enter. Now this time, instead of 5mm, we want to offset our line 6mm. So we're going to hit 6 and then press enter. Then click your line. Again, press the arrow to go in the other direction. Enter, 6, enter. Okay, then I'll do the horizontal line. Click it, enter, 6, enter. Click the horizontal line, arrow to change direction, enter, 6, enter. And then this last diagonal line, click, enter, 6, enter. Click again, arrow to change direction, enter, 6, enter. Okay, and then the last thing we'll do before we finish this sketch is go to the top, select the trim tool, and we're just going to trim these overlapping parts. So this line, that one and that one, that one and that one, just to get rid of any of the lines that we don't really need, that are just making this sketch overly complex. You don't have to do this part if this is confusing. You can skip this. It just makes it easier to select the right regions for our extrude. Then you can click the tick. Oh, actually, we'll rename the sketch to handle, and then click the tick to let OnShape know that we're finished. Okay, the last thing we're going to do is select the extrude tool. We need to select the outside of each of our circles. We don't want to select the inside because that's what we're going to use to mate our handle to our sliders. And then we're selecting all these regions in the middle until you have a handle that kind of looks like a fidget spinner, I guess. So there is quite a few parts to select, but that's just the nature of the drawing that we did. Okay, I think that's everything. Yep. All right, once you've got all the parts selected like this, we're just going to change the extrude box to say 12mm because we only want to extrude this 12mm. And then you can also make sure that we're creating a new part and rename it to handle, and then click the tick to let OnShape know that you're finished. Okay, and they're the 3 parts that we need to complete our trammel. Once you've got this far, rename your last part in your parts window handle. Then I want you to select a color for each of your parts. Completely up to you. I don't mind what you choose to go with. And then once you've done that, upload a screenshot of your completed trammel parts underneath this post in Google Classroom. And in the next tutorial, I'll show you how to assemble your trammel and then animate it so that it functions. And that's it for this tutorial.